What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Creative Collective Show. I'm your host, Dan.
And I'm Zach.
And today we are joined by Abby. How's it going, Abby?
Hi, guys. Nice to see you on a Saturday morning, all dressed up.
Yeah, got to keep it fresh, a nice, comfortable sweatshirt. I think this is one of our first podcasts that we've done on the weekend. So another episode of the Creative Collective Show in quarantine. I guess we should probably change the album art just temporarily.
I know, like in quarantine, something scratched off. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we get started, I just wanted to go over a few things. If you guys are new to our stream or you haven't checked out our podcast before, be sure to check out the Creative Collective Show, where business meets creative, on all major platforms. If you are watching this live, be sure to comment #live or #replay if you're watching the replay. It means a lot to us. If you get a chance after you listen to some of our episodes, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That means the world to us. And check us out on social media at Strix Media NJ. We are a content creation studio out of Morristown, New Jersey, and we produce videos, do some photography, social media, web design, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And at any point during the stream, if you have any questions for our guest, be sure to ask them in the comments, and then we'll be sure to get them all answered at the end. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Abby, tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for doing your show on Saturday, Dan and Zach. I do appreciate you accommodating. I did shower for you both today. That hasn't happened a lot in the last few days, weeks, months. Let's see. I currently have, my name's Abbey LeVine. I have been in content creation for a long time, almost 30 years. I actually went to college and studied television at Syracuse many, many years ago. And I currently own a content production company called Swirl Studios. We're based in New York City. Been in Manhattan for 10 years, and before that, LA. And I came up through television. I started in talk shows and launched the Dr. Phil show, which is in its 21st season. So that'll give you an idea of how long I've been doing this. I worked on Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher, which was an amazing show to work on. Yep. I have a lot of stories about that show and Bill. And then I ended up wanting to do something a little bit longer form. So I went into crime. And I launched a show called Beyond Scared Straight, and we took kids into prisons to show them what their life would turn out like if they didn't straighten out.
Wow, that's crazy.
I've been inside 22 maximum security prisons, which I also have a lot of stories about. And then from there, the reality world took over. So I've worked on a number of big shows, but most people know Love and Hip Hop. And so I was an executive producer on that show. And then, I've had 100 gigs in between and always worked on marketing campaigns, sort of as a side gig. And about 3 years ago, I produced a film for a pharmaceutical company, and that became my primary business, and launched Swirl Studios because I really enjoy telling stories through a brand lens and having a little bit more creative control too.
That's awesome. So I kind of wanted to get into a little bit about how you got into the film TV industry and like what that process kind of looked like.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it is not easy getting into television. My story, it's not easy, but it's possible. And I tell people that I think personal connections mean the world to television. So I actually graduated from Syracuse University in '95, and I couldn't, but this was way before the internet. And it took me a while to decide to move to Los Angeles. And my story, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous, but I drove from studio to studio with a hard copy of my resume and dropped it off at the guard gate. So Paramount, Sony, Universal, CBS, NBC, and literally was handing them my resumes thinking that would get me work because I had.
What were you interviewing for, or like
anything?
What was
that was the problem.
Okay, got it.
I had no idea what I was doing, right? I just wanted a job in LA. I had interned at Good Morning America in college, and I really wanted a job there, and there was just no openings. I got an interview with the head of 2020 at the time. I remember this guy's name, but he couldn't place me anywhere, and he sort of sent me home, and I said, okay, I might not be ready for New York City yet. So I became a page at CBS TV studios in LA, and I started off answering phones on the set of Young and Restless and writing name tags on The Price is Right.
All right.
Cool.
That's a great little like start into like the whole thing.
It was really fun, actually. Yeah, it was a dream come true. I had gone to CBS to try to become a contestant on The Price is Right because I sort of was throwing my hands up in the air after a couple months. No, it's not even true. It was a couple of weeks of looking for work in LA, and like nothing was really working. So like my big lesson in all of this is that for people is that I was there trying to do what I wanted to do, but it wasn't working. So I decided to go try to be a contestant on The Price is Right and like have fun, and do something that I liked. And that's what I got the job doing.
Interesting. So what happened after that? How did you get into the like kind of where you are now? Like how did you make that transition?
What I tell people is that I feel that you can best move up in this in TV production. So I'm exclusively unscripted television content and branded marketing. I've done a couple of films on the side, but I've only been in the film arena as an executive producer. So in order to move up, I've always changed jobs. Like you go from one to another and you ask for a bigger amount of responsibility. And typically people tend to grant it because it is a lot about being in the right place at the right time, which after quarantine we'll all be able to do. But if you're willing to do the work and show that you're smart and you're a hustler and you can do the job and it's maybe a little bit less money out of their pocket, then typically that's how I've always moved up. I mean, my first show running job, I took on 3 shows at one time for a company because they were just bumping my salary by probably an eighth of what they were being given from the network to run the show. But I took on 3 shows at one time. So, you become an asset.
Wow. So what's it like to like start a show? I was actually always curious, and I kind of want to ask this question later when you started, like you said, like, hey, I want to get into like my own thing and start my own show. What's that process, like look like in terms of like starting a show? Like what's the first, who starts it? You know what I mean? Is it the producer? Is it someone coming to the producer? Is there a need or a demand for it first and then come like how does that, what's that process like?
There are several different ways to create a show. And so I'll tell you about traditional television. And now because of the internet, there's so many other ways to create programming, right? And distribute it, which is really a blessing for all of us content creators now, right? Yeah, I'm a big fan of digital distribution now. But traditionally, there's something called a mandate. So different networks will issue mandates. Now you have to know somebody who gets a mandate. A lot of time that's an agent or somebody in development at a network. And so typically being repped by an agent, which I have and my companies have for the last 15 years, is helpful. And so they know what different companies are looking for in terms of what type of content. Alternatively, there's a lot of good ideas out there, and the hardest thing about it is finding something that's original to sell to a network, right? And so typically 2 things sell TV shows, characters, big characters, and formats. And so if you come up with a unique angle and you can plug some really unique characters into it and then create an original format or take one from other countries and make it one for the US, then you got a show on your hands.
Cool. So how did you get into your first original piece of work?
Let me think about that question. I think the answer to that is it's all about passion, right? And so you tell the story that you know or that you want to tell. And so it's typically through thinking that a lens is interesting. If it's interesting to you, it's going to be interesting to other people. And I consider myself a portal through which stories are told, right? I'm not telling the story. I move things in a direction that it can be told on screen. And so if I've done everything from been face to face with murderers in prisons to interview Lady Gaga for 4 days in Australia. They're both equally as fascinating, right? To me, for different reasons. Original content, look, we all know what it's like to stare at a blank piece of paper, and the inspiration for a show just needs to come from anything that you find interesting. And so you can start by writing an outline. I find outlines tedious. I would never create programming if I had to write an outline for all of them. But typically, these days you can just shoot something too. You can film. I mean, what's incredible about what's going on in the world right now is that DSLR cameras aren't that expensive. Audio gear isn't that inaccessible. It used to be that you had to hire a professional crew to create your own programming. Now, if people are able to use a DSLR camera and have access to decent audio and decent lighting, you can create a sales tape on your own. And that's very, very exciting to me for how far the industry's come and where it's going, because there's just millions of places that are looking for valuable content.
Yeah, I love that. Because we actually got into the game right when DSLR cameras were becoming like a mainstream way of like making, I guess, like commercials and like, just like general promo videos and product videos and like that kind of stuff. And it's awesome what you can do with like the tech that's out now. Have you noticed from like when you started to where we are now, like has like the amount that's required to produce something gone down in terms of budget?
Yeah. I have a couple sizzle reels now that I'm shopping to major networks that I had an intern shoot. Under my direction. One of them takes place in a car. And so I happen to love the look of DSLR cameras. Look, every DP in the world is different. The commercial guys want to push everything expensive under the sun. And I happen to think that being nimble is the most valuable thing you can be as a content creator, because the DSLR cameras look absolutely gorgeous. Look, the film that we're going to talk about in a little while, I mean, right now, the primary source of footage is coming from iPhones. And it looks really amazing because that's just where we're at right now. But go back to what I said a few minutes ago. I think it's important to have a really beautiful shot and you have to have clean audio. But the most important thing is a good character and a great format. So what's happened is these prosumer technologies have given way more people access to being incredible storytellers. Influencers on Instagram are, that is the social media version of what we're talking about. Now, is every influencer interesting? Definitely not. Is everyone with a DSLR camera capable of producing professional programming? I don't think so. You still have to know how to
100%
massage great footage,
right.
But it's exciting.
It is. So I was going to ask you about, so you've done a lot of projects so far. Is there anything that you found? It sounds like you were in some pretty interesting situations. Do you have any that really stick out in your mind as like something that's like really crazy or really scary or like one of the coolest sets you've ever been on?
I sort of gave you my 2 answers already, but I'll give you more information about them. So definitely the craziest. I happen to enjoy real stories of real people from various walks of life. So to me, we're all one, right? And it's just fascinating, like where we're born into what we become and what our trajectory is. And I believe everybody has a story to tell. I firmly believe it's just how you tell it and what that angle is. And so for me, the maximum security prisons that I went into, the one moment that I was never nervous. So Beyond Scared Straight was launched season 1. I was a director, and there was one other director who was very different from me. And we interviewed a lot of the kids. There were 8 kids per episode, and we each took 4 kids' backstories, and then we took them into prisons. So, it was a 5-day shoot in a prison town. And so we would go into these kids' homes and get their backstory about why they were misbehaving. And a lot of them were in juvie. And of course, they were hard to handle. So there was that challenge. And then we would take them into prisons. In season 1, we were still able to go into maximum security prisons. And I never felt scared being in these prisons because we were having them interact with real criminals that were convicted felons. But I never was nervous, because we always had either a CO, a correctional officer, or another inmate with us at all times. Now, when I did this interview, I went in looking like this. And the executive producer, Arnold Shapiro, said, like, basically, yeah, well, I think you could be great for this job, but you need to come back tomorrow and show me what you would look like going into prison. And so I had to go back the next day, and, he did literally a wardrobe check, and I had no makeup and hair down and nothing tight. So it was interesting. This was over 15 years ago now. And wow. I'm still friends with Arnold, and he's a great guy. And A&E had a long run of Beyond Scared Straight. But the one time I was scared was in San Quentin prison. They segregate different races in the yard, and people aren't allowed to, there's no officers in the yard in San Quentin. The way that they protect the inmates and the film crews, because there's not that many film crews, is through overhead, any type of, they shoot you from overhead. So there's guards watching overhead. So I'm thinking, here I am walking through the yard in San Quentin, a female, and all some guy has to do, if he has a handmade knife, is it'll take 2 seconds, and they can't shoot him, right, from up above and see this happen. So that was, I'll never forget that moment walking through San Quentin. And then my other moment of, fame was being backstage filming Lady Gaga going on stage. And, I was part of her prayer circle before she went on stage. And then when she came off stage, she's like, "Where's Abbey? I want to talk to Abbey. Bring Abbey backstage." And I'm like, yeah.
That's awesome.
It was really fun.
So is there something that you wish that you knew when you were just getting started that might be a little piece of advice for someone that's trying to get into the industry, or is, just getting started in the industry? Yeah, I can clearly identify that for people. Don't ask people what they can do for you. Ask them what you can do for them. So I think that mindset is very important for people starting out. And it's a little bit cliche, but yes, most people that are executives and showrunners and running companies are actually really busy. We're all adults, but we're all trying to balance a busy lifestyle and a lot of projects. And I want to help you. Right? I do want to help you. I do love helping, especially young women, come up. I always have interns. I actually try to get people from Syracuse often, but I love mentoring. But it can't feel like you're sucking energy out of me, right? It has to feel like there's a way that you're giving to our company and our show, and
meaning even if you're a production assistant, I've hired people that have absolutely no experience because they're eager to learn and they have a great attitude, and you can tell that they're paying attention and they're focused on how to make the whole experience better for everyone, not just themselves.
Awesome. No, that's great advice. Because a lot of people, I feel like, see the opportunity, say, to have an intern, but then it ends up being a lot more work than they're actually giving back to the organization or that project. Right.
What can you bring? Like, also, like, know your superpower. I'm not the most organized person. I know that. I was not a good assistant, actually. But I have a super ability. I love interviewing people and I can make people feel good. I'm like a cheerleader type. So when I'm looking, you're always managing up. I try to get support of people that are more organized than I am, per se. And yet, if I was giving advice, I would say also don't oversell yourself. You don't want to talk about your weaknesses too much, but also don't oversell who you are, because undersell yourself and overdeliver.
I love that.
Awesome. So when you were getting started, or maybe in the middle of your career, or maybe even now, do you happen to have any mentors, whether it's a real life mentor or maybe someone that you listen to on a podcast or watch their videos and get inspired by?
So many. Let me think about this question. I mean, so what comes to head, right, who I think is slaying it right now is Gary Vee. I know everybody is, you either love him or you hate him, but I mean, I love how no bullshit he is. I also love that he is constantly telling people that you have to work in order to actually achieve. I think that very simple message can be lost a lot of times. And I like how in your face he is. I mean, I just think sometimes people need to hear that. I'm very also like pro feminine, and he's anything but that. So I wouldn't necessarily say that he's for everybody. In fact, I'm probably one of the only women that I know that really, really loves him. That's not true, but he wouldn't come to mind for most women. Other mentors I've had, I mean, look, you have to pay attention to people who are healthy-minded and collaborative when you're going along your process. If somebody is put together and calm and pays attention to you, they're going to be your rabbi. That's like a saying, right? You want to have people that shepherd you along in your journey, and you can identify them. If people come to the office and they're a mess, or if they have to reschedule 10 times before they can actually speak to you, or they swear a lot, or they're not able to fully pay attention, I don't know what the swearing has to do with it, because Gary swears all the time. But like, you have to be able to be of healthy mind and spirit in order to mentor other people and take care of other people. So that's who you look for when you're looking for people that will help you, because again, we're all busy and we're all trying to keep ourselves above water all the time. It's just how it is. Even Arnold Shapiro, who sold Beyond Scared Straight, I'll never forget the very first episode that we did of that show, earned record-breaking ratings for the network, 3.5 million viewers, which for A&E was really a lot. And we were on the road shooting a show, and we got the news that we broke all the records. And I'll just never forget, he was like, okay, great. Basically, now we have the next hurdle to manage, right? So it wasn't like a huge celebration. He knew that he started high. But what that means is now we have to keep it high, right? And so that's his mentality. And so you have to just think about how you're supporting the other people.
Awesome. I love that.
So I had one more question here before we get into this whole COVID POV thing. Was there anybody, right, that while you were coming up, like gave you kind of like the Abbey, like, what are you doing? Like, this isn't for you. Like, what do you like? This isn't where you should be. Like, were there any naysayers or anyone you had to overcome?
Oh yeah, way more than there were supportive people. look, you have to have thick skin. I have cried many, many, many nights into my porridge in this business. I had, I'm so tempting to name people. I was an assistant at one point to somebody who really was not nice to me. And my mother, of all people, said, she's jealous of you. And meanwhile, she's got 4 different shows going. This was one of my second job, like my second job in Hollywood. And I was going home and just crying every night. And I don't think my mom was exactly right that she was jealous of me, but I do think that there was something not even threatening. We just didn't vibe. And what you don't think you're gonna, what I didn't think of doing at that time was just cutting bait. Right. I didn't think that I could leave this job. I felt tethered to this assistant job. I felt like I had to be at this job, and I had the power to leave. You know, it wasn't going to ruin my career in Hollywood to leave this job. And so I would say, like, take inventory of where, if you're somewhere where you're not happy, you can leave and you can change and you can gently, you know, create your own new reality. You're not tied somewhere. Honestly, more often than not, I think people, you know, I had some really awful producers above me in, I don't want to name things, but in different structures. And you can't take it personally. That's the main thing. It's important to know, again, going back to, like, I'm looking back now, those people were stressed out and worried for their job. Like, the environments weren't very healthy. And so it's not personal. So just keep it moving.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. That's a really great take on, like, the whole thing. Like, hey, if someone's angry or, you know, like, giving you, you know, shade or whatever, you got to really think, like, what's going through their head to even get to that point to bring up that much negativity about somebody else. You know?
Exactly. And I think when you're a lot younger, it's like, it's really hard to put that in perspective, because you think, I spent 15 years in LA and I've been here for 10 years. And I thought at the beginning of my career, I'll never get any other job here. And I'm so lucky to have this job. And as you come up through the industry, you keep gratitude going for work that you get and relationships that you have and jobs and places, but also you're valuable. We're all very valuable, and you do have to remember that and keep that in perspective too. And remember, the person who employed you needs you for something also. You know, you are an asset.
100%.
All right. So before we get into the documentary, which I'm super excited to hear the logistics and the story behind it,
into it.
Everyone that's involved. If you're watching on Facebook Live, I see that we have 18 people watching. Comment #live if you're watching live. If you're watching the replay at a later date, comment #replay so we know that people are enjoying our stream. And then also, if you have any questions for Abby, we will be answering them at the end. Let's get into it. Zach, I know you have a bunch of questions, so kick this one off.
Yeah. So Abby, tell us about how this idea started, and what you did to, like, execute on this idea, because it's a very interesting idea.
Thank you. And thank you both for being willing to talk about this now. It's really important. So I am executive producing a film about COVID. It is tentatively titled COVID POV, and that is our hashtag and on Facebook and Instagram. So it's at COVID POV. And what happened on March 15th was I sat here at that desk behind you, and I wrote a post on a Facebook group that is made up of all women in television. I said, it looks like we're all going to be quarantined for the next 8 weeks. And so what the hell else are we going to be doing with our time? So let's put together a film on different perspectives of people going through this quarantine, because, you know, you can see that there's going to be incredible stories that come out of this. It's an unprecedented time in history. Never in the world have we ever been quarantined as a not only as a, right, as a city, as a state, as a country, but as a world, we're all experiencing the same thing, but yet from very different perspectives. And so I wanted to make sure that I was able to provide a cathartic and interesting place for different people to go. And so what's happened is, beyond my wildest dreams, I'm working in a collective of female filmmakers, and everybody has been showing up to Zooms daily. And what I say is we started pre-production, production, and post-production all at the same time. And it is remarkable that we're right in the middle of it. And we have probably about 65 different contributors coming in from all over the world.
Awesome.
Wow.
Now, what are they? So you touched on it a little bit. What are they focusing on, or what are you asking for them to document throughout their day?
Sure. Well, so because so everyone's filming on their iPhone, and we're getting experts with some celebrities and some experts interviews that we're doing. But the goal of the film is to show different perspectives of the kind of the story arc of what's happening over this time. So we have everything, and what we're going to do is whittle it down to likely 5 to 7 main stories and present it as one film, ideally on Netflix or HBO or somewhere in theaters if anyone's watching.
We'll have to tag them up.
Places.
Let's go, Netflix. Let's get on it.
Let's go, Netflix. Prime will take you.
Joe Exotic got nothing on this.
Exactly. Right. Well, so we were able to, forecast that this is going to be very unique times. And so it's very important for historical reasons and also for sort of social experiment reasons to show what's going on in the world. And so the amazing, amazing women that continue to show up. Look, we're all working for free. We haven't gotten a budget yet. Everyone on this staff and crew believes in the idea that we have to give people a voice during this, because look, there's some very serious things going on right now. And everyone has a different perspective. So some people can't eat. Some people are very lonely. Some people's kids are driving them crazy. A lot of people's health is affected. And it's just fascinating how quarantine is going for different people in different places and what they're doing with all of their emotions. Sure.
Yeah, from what you described so far, I already kind of see the story in my head, which is really cool. I just feel like this culmination of these different characters all struggling with completely different things, and how other people might be struggling with one thing might be looking at it as a very positive thing, on their side. And so it's like seeing that perspective. Well, I'm lonely. Well, I'm happy being lonely, or right. I'm happy to spend time with my kids, or I fucking hate my kids. It's right. Like this conflicting thing, and then you get to see how their emotions change from the beginning of quarantine to the end of quarantine. And I'm really curious to see how this actually ends for us as a whole. What's it going to look like? Is it going to continue? Is this going to be a thing? Like, what are your thoughts anyway? Like, do you think this is going to be, into summer, winter, and next year? Or like, how do you see this playing out?
Well, I want to just comment, Zach, on what you just said, because this has been, we sort of went, nose diving into this, thinking like, let's get this up and running, right? And so we've actually been in production now for an entire month. We have a month of footage already. Wow. We started getting submissions on March 16th, which was at the very, very beginning. So we think we're one of the first ones in to be able to watch everybody's stories evolve. And so this is something that we just started really talking about, is that what is going to be the most fascinating in some regards is comparing different perspectives. And everyone thinks that, I don't even know that people have even had the brain space to start thinking about whether or not their perspective is different or worse than other people's. But you do start, like, some people have gotten stimulus checks now, and some people have gotten denied for loans, and some people, the perspectives are all very different. And so that is part of what we're capturing. And I do want to emphasize that it's all women working as producers on the film, which has also given it a very unique process. There's a very nurturing process to what we're doing with our cast. We call them contributors, because we're really encouraging them to be emotional on camera and to be giving us their deepest emotions. And so we feel like we're sort of lifting the veil of what people are doing behind closed doors. And that's really important. It's going to be really important to have that documented for future generations. Imagine explaining this to kids in 20 years.
I know, it's so hard.
You have to see it to believe it, right?
It's crazy. And what's so cool about this too is that, it doesn't have to be just like family members, like you said, like people that are small business owners that, now what, like, what do they do? Or someone that's like really thriving in this environment, like, what do they do to change and adapt? And like, maybe they're not worried at all. Maybe they're living life 100% the same and it's not affecting them zero, like there's so many different walks of life in this. I think it's going to be a really interesting. I already want to watch it. What do you got?
Thank you. Well, make sure you get a ticket to the premiere. Well, a moment that I have in my mind about also the behind the scenes of this, right? The social media campaign. By the way, we have an incredible social media presence already, and we're taking submissions for our social media pages, which is also it's at COVID POV. And for people that don't want to appear and submit day after day after day to the film, we are asking for submissions to our Instagram page for posts and Facebook page for posts, because there's so many different stories to tell. So if people want to contribute to our Instagram, there's 5 questions that we're asking people to answer. So we have a format. And if people want to submit either to the film or to the Instagram, either or, they can go to my company website, which is swirl-studios.com, swirl-studios.com. And everything's very clearly laid out there. And our incredible female filmmakers will take care of you. But I want to answer your question before, Zach. Thank you guys for posting that, which is, how do I think this is going to end? And I think that what's the scariest right now is that everything is so uncertain. That's what's so interesting, that we don't know. We all think we might be out of this in a month, right? So today we're recording this on April 18th, 2020. In my mind, I might get to produce the show that I was hired to produce starting April 1st in June or July. But now, things in August, September, November, they've been canceled already. I don't know if you guys know, but Burning Man's canceled. Wow. So that's in August. In New York City, they're talking about keeping the beaches closed. I mean, I want to rip my hair out thinking about being in New York City without the beaches this summer, right? Like, I don't think we can conceptualize that far ahead, which is also a fascinating thing for our film to document.
Sure.
Yeah,
so
I was going to say, go ahead, Dan, sorry.
Yeah, so that leads into my next question is, with your planning right now around this documentary and implementing all of these people to work together, do you see an ending to it, or are you just going to keep documenting, keep curating content, and then, however this pans out, it's kind of in the hands of the coronavirus at this point?
That was literally my question.
So yeah, you guys are thinking alike. Well, here's what's been so interesting. The coronavirus feels like, to me and to all of us, a lot of people in television, we're creatives, but we're also pretty control freaks, right? And so what's happening is that everything feels so out of control right now, right? In the world, you have to think about your health and your finances and your loved ones and your sanity and your food supply, and your travel's all canceled. Everything has just been completely overturned overnight. So what's been very cathartic about the film is that it's giving us all something to channel our creative energy into for the filmmakers, but also for the contributors. So in a way, it feels like we're doing something proactive to contribute to history. That's really how we're looking at it, that we're creating a historical document. The plan started as to create a film with 5 to 7 main stories, like a regular documentary, and have sort of smaller interstitials with stories that might not have as many twists and turns to them, as one film that ends the day that we all get out of jail. What we've started talking about is potentially doing a multi-part series on Netflix that would cover what happens after quarantine to all of our people too. I mean, right now we're working with several women that are pregnant, and we're all interested to see what happens when they deliver their child. We're working with several workers from the front line, including people that have come to New York City from small towns. So they're experiencing time away from their families and the inability to connect with their loved ones, and you know, their lives are at stake trying to save other people just because of their profession. We have students whose lives have been upended. We have small business owners, including a blueberry farmer. We have people in Spain and Italy who might be going back out into the real world, away from quarantine before we do. Right now, that's a lot of our lead stories. We have a mom in New Jersey who's trying to run a small business, and homeschooling the kids has been a very big topic of conversation amongst parents. And actually, we're currently actually looking for more essential workers from grocery and a police officer and different essential workers, because we want to make sure we're telling that story too. We're covering healthcare pretty well, but who knows what's going to happen? That's the reason why we wanted to document all of this, is because it's just all so unknown, and we want to make sure that there's some trail.
For sure. I have 2 questions about the process of documenting, and my very first question is it, first of all, have you made a documentary before, or is this like a new silo for you to focus on?
I've always wanted to make a documentary, and I never did because there's no money in it when you first get started.
Yep.
So this quarantine provided literally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to focus on a passion project. And, that's why it was just a no-brainer for me, because I would go insane sitting here, but, not working on something anyway. I have several clients for my business that I have little things going. And actually, I'm pitching a TV show next week to a major network with my agent, something. So things are starting to come back a little bit. But yeah, no, this is the first time I've really launched a film effort. I've created documentaries for television before, but they've been backed by a network or a brand.
So this is very exciting.
It is.
Yeah, no, that's
yeah,
absolutely amazing. So you just led me right into my question that I was going to ask you. So say if you have never done this before, or you've never written a video or a TV show, or we'll use the example of a documentary. What does the process look like? Or and I'm sure there's different ways of going about getting your show picked up, but what are some of the usual things that maybe someone that has never done this before would need to know? Or do you need other people on your team? Like you just mentioned your agent.
Definitely. Yeah.
So how does that work? And what does that process usually look like? Or is there any, crazy ways that you've gone around and skipped steps in that process?
Yeah, good question. I don't think you can skip steps in that particular process. So it really takes a village. There's absolutely no film without our casting department and our post department and our social department, because everybody washes each other's back, right? And I certainly 1,000,000% could never do this by myself. I give a lot of credit to people who strap on a camera and go across the world somewhere and actually film. Like Making of a Murderer, I think, is the most fascinating documentary. Those two women just figured out that was going to be a story before it was a story. I mean, I always wanted to work for 60 Minutes. Investigative journalism, I think, is very, very interesting. And so to me, at least, this film is freestyle investigative journalism. And I would say if people want to do this, to answer your question, Dan, that they need to get together a team. I mean, it's a unique circumstance what happened. I keep saying, like, I can't believe everyone's doing this just for the passion, but we have, right now at least, we have creative control over what we're doing. And again, what's very unique about this particular film that may not apply to, like, people wanting to do this on their own, is that it's because we're so because this is live, if people are watching this in the next month, even if you're home and you're bored and you want to start something, just start it. I mean, you don't need permission from anybody to start it. Here, start it. You have permission, right? Like, you start your project. And usually it's pretty good to have a plan and storyboards and at least a focus. Typically before I would pitch something, I would write out a treatment, shoot something, and plan networks where it would go to and have some sort of plan. But because of the timing of this, there was zero pre-production. So I'm a just jump in feet first kind of gal. So I would tell people to do that. You gotta follow what you want to do with your brain and put it into video these days. It's important.
For sure.
Awesome.
What's that like? How long would say we weren't in quarantine, right? How long would a process take for once you shot it, and then say, actually, is there an order of operations if you shot do you shoot a pilot first before you shoot the whole thing? Like, usually, I know this in this documentary scenario, you really can't do that. You have to just keep compiling.
Right.
But I'm assuming there would be enough budget or enough passion to at least shoot the pilot and have that be enough to see if that gets picked up or not. How long does that process take between when you make something to pitching it to getting it on the air?
Usually a little bit longer than we're aiming for here. So actually, we have a sizzle reel. It's really a proof of concept that we're working on. We should be releasing it in the next week to 10 days, maybe sooner. We are actually doing a GoFundMe because cool. I am hoping to get these filmmakers paid. It's completely separate. Only a portion of the money is going to the film, probably about 15% of what we're going to be asking for is going towards some hard costs that I've been outlaying. But I actually do want to try to get everybody a little bit of money, but no one's doing this for the money. Typically, what would happen is, yes, you would shoot a sizzle reel, which is a, anywhere between 2 and there's a lot of different formats. I've done sizzles that are 2.5 minutes. And right now I have 3 sizzles for shows that are 8 minutes because they're digital shows. And I basically, my company filmed a sample episode. And so I'm shopping that around with my agent. So if you wanted to follow a process, typically it would be create a concept, shoot a sizzle, edit a sizzle, and then write a treatment to go with the sizzle. So knowing your character and your format, and then shop it around. So that's the thing with development. You have to be willing to invest your time and your money and your effort up front.
For sure.
So
being a process.
Yeah.
So quick side question. So you mentioned having all of these people being collaborative and working together, and the response has, blown your mind. How has that been kind of organizing that and being a leader of that many people through Zoom or through whatever way you're communicating that? What does that look like?
I mean, I could cry thinking about beautiful and organic it is. The process is that I posted this post on there's a group with 18,000 women, all that work in television, because it's a collaborative process, right? We always need each other in this. And I posted on there. And so we started off with about double the amount of people that answered. So I responded to everybody that answered. I invited them to a Zoom call. And there's one other person who's sort of my level, who's co-executive producing this with me, and she's also comes from development. And she and I have been, we did form into groups as we went. I mean, it's been amazing. And there's one person who's taking over leading all of casting who comes from that casting background. So sort of what's happened is that there's a group of senior people that have been doing this for a long time. And then there are other people that came on that really wanted to learn the documentary process. And I think what's so unique about this process is that we've all wanted to do a documentary film. There are a few documentary filmmakers amongst us, and they're absolutely incredible. And they're helping us pull in incredible stories and tell them in a very unique way. And so we were Zooming every day, all of us, up until about a week and a half ago. And now we have, and there's a huge social media that is, yes, hello, Marnie. There's a huge social media aspect to what we're doing too, which actually I think is going to be the first piece of this film that gets the most attention first, because it's sort of a snapshot of what we're doing with the film. And it's a very important piece of all media right now. But we've sort of formulated so now we have our main Zoom twice a week we always say it's going to be an hour, but it always runs over. We have a casting Zoom twice a week, also ends up running over an hour. And we have an executive thread now, one day a week, over an hour. And then we have a WhatsApp thread where there's several different threads going in the different departments. And we've pulled in an attorney and a celebrity booker. Somebody gave us a free music library. A friend of mine on Facebook gave us a free music library for this. It's been magic. I can't wait to see what we create.
That's awesome.
It's so awesome. It all just falls into place when everyone is looking to create.
And you guys, we've never seen each other face to face. I keep saying I think the best moment ever to promote this is going to be when we all hug each other on the red carpet, because we show up in our
first time to see each other.
Yes, that will be the first time we all see each other is on a red carpet.
That's awesome.
That's so cool.
Anyone that's listening, I know that we have a couple people live. If you have any questions for Abbey before we wrap up, we'd love to get those questions answered. Abbey, if there's anything that you wanted to kind of get out there that maybe we haven't covered.
Well, I do hear the baby, so it would be awesome to answer questions. I'm a solo, on top of all of this, I'm a solo mom of a 7-month-old by choice. So it's all just been such an incredible journey. And what I want to add is that I really hope that anybody watching this, feels inspired to start anything, anytime, if it makes you happy. And we all have to pay our bills. I have no idea if this film is going to pay any of our bills, but I do believe it's a very important piece of history. And I think because of that and because of the intention behind it, it is going to be very successful. And I strongly encourage people to follow what they think they should be doing.
Awesome. So
awesome.
Thank you so much for taking out the time today. We really appreciate it. If anyone's still watching on Facebook Live or YouTube, comment #live if you just joined us on this stream. Hit the share button. Let other people know about this amazing documentary, our amazing guest, our awesome podcast. And where can everyone find you, your company, the documentary, and where should we be looking out for it if it drops in soon?
I know it'd be great if it like dropped in the next 8 weeks or something. So the hashtag on Instagram is at COVID POV. That is also our business page on Facebook, COVID POV. If anyone wants to look into being cast on the film, which is, we ask that people are self-submitting using their iPhone at least for 30 days. You will go to swirl-studios.com and we will tell you what we're asking you to do. And we also have information there about how to just submit one time via email for our Instagram page. And you guys are awesome. Thank you for getting up on, Saturday morning at 11 a.m. And Dan did this even without coffee. He didn't get his coffee. I've been up since 6:30, so this is midway through the day for me.
Well, I think that we've covered it. Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks, guys, for tuning in to another episode of the Creative Collective Show. And we will see you on the next one.
Thanks for having me.
Love you guys. Thank you.